Leonora Carrington was very drawn to Celtic mythology and imagery. During the first decade or so of her years in Mexico, she created a number of paintings incorporating Celtic imagery. While a child, her mother Mary had read her Irish stories and legends. The early pencil and crayon sketch of 1945, The High Queen of Ireland, shows a vessel with a female figurehead. A number of tableaux of imagery are seen within the ship. This sketch may have been preliminary to her great painting, The Distractions of Dagobert, of the same year, as the flying female figure with antlers also appears there. Dagobert II, also called Saint Dagobert, 650 to 679, was a Merovingian Frankish king of Austrasia. He was the son of Sigebert III, but following the death of his father in 656, he was packed off as a child to an Irish monastery because of the power struggle for the succession. An old tradition relates that, during his exile, he married Matilda, an Anglo-Saxon princess, but another story has him marry the Queen of Ireland. Carrington's painting consists of a series of emblematic images, almost pasted together. There does not appear to be a linear narrative. This way of working must have appealed to her, as this painting set her style for most of the remainder of her life. She creates powerful, engaging little tableaux that are not simply linked together, thus puzzling the viewer. The sources of this imagery are often obscure. In creating this picture, it is likely that Carrington read into the myths and legends surrounding Dagobert II. She was extremely well read, especially in mythology. A few years later, she paints a simple picture of Dagobert with his wife, who is holding the child who would be Dagobert II. This may be based on a popular 18th century French satirical song, Good King Dagobert, which ridicules Dagobert I, as one of the lines has, "His hat hung like a deer." In 1951, Carrington created Samhain. This is the ancient Celtic fire festival celebrated on the eve of the 31st of October. It became Christianized as Halloween or All Hallows Day. Samhain was a time when the doorways to the other world opened, allowing supernatural beings and the souls of the dead to come into our world, and was especially a festival for the dead. Within an enclosed dark space, with a spider's webbed gate, 3 spirit forms fly a kite, which bears the image of a red-headed spirit. In the sky above are 2 moons, one light and the other dark. The figure in the foreground stands before a little door that seems to allow entrance into the dark realm. She turned again to Celtic mythology a few years later, in 1954, with her painting The Sidhe. These were the white people of the Tuatha Dé Danann, one of the early mythological inhabitants of Ireland, who were supernatural beings living in fairy mounds. Carrington depicts them as beings of light. While 4 of them sit enjoying the meal, the figure on the right plays with glowing globes and star-filled forms, while a horse spirit stands watching. The king of the Sidhe was a Dagda, the good god. He was associated with magic, druidry, and spiritual wisdom. In her painting, The Chair, Dagda, Tuatha Dé Danann of 1955, she shows his throne, which bears many magical sigils. Beside it stands a round table. Spirit force emerges like a mist from the throne and flows onto the table, on which is set a glowing egg-shaped vase, from which a spectral rose grows. The Dagda was also the god of fertility and vegetative life. In 1948, the British poet Robert Graves wrote his influential work, The White Goddess, a historical grammar of poetic myth, in which he sought to locate poetic inspiration within the goddess forms of Celtic mythology, especially the tree alphabet. Leonora Carrington must have found this book fascinating, as it would have resonated with her own ideas. Thus her untitled painting of 1958, which has been named The White Goddess. Here, luminous like one of the she stands in a well. A fierce-looking wolf-like animal acts as a guardian of this well of inspiration, around which stand various birds. An egg-shaped luminous vase, somewhat similar to that in her painting of the Dagda's throne of a few years earlier, is placed at the bottom left. A serpent coils around its base and protects its eggs. Ordeal of Owen, 1959. The Owen of this painting is Owen ap Cadogan, who died in 1116, a Prince of Powys in eastern Wales. He is best known for his abduction of Nest, the wife of Gerald of Windsor. This led to a series of power struggles and invasions, and he was eventually killed by Gerald. Leonora focused on the spiritual price he had to pay for this abduction and rape, as 4 Celtic shamanistic priestesses seal his fate through a magical ritual. A cauldron is placed on an altar, and the 4 figures work their spell on the soul of Owen by bringing substances into the magical work. One cries a tear for Nest, a second brings fire, while another gives her own living breath, and the large priestess on the right drops some powerful substance from a little pouch and stirs the cauldron to work their magic. Below, we see Owen on his horse, now consumed by hellish fire. In 1969, Carrington depicts the return of Boadicea. Boadicea was the 1st century queen of the British Celtic Iceni tribe, who led an uprising against the occupying forces of the Roman Empire in AD 60 or 61, and who died shortly after its failure. She is now considered a British folk hero. Carrington chooses to present her in a positive, victorious light as a female warrior figure, rather than a victim of patriarchal Roman authority. Here she has been drawn in her chariot by a white and a dark horse, hybridized with a boar. The horse part is sacred to the Celtic goddess Epona, and the boar to the classical goddess of love and war, Astarte. 2 other horse-boar hybrids chase after a shrouded figure, and a 3rd hybrid has caught one and disemboweled him with its tusks. In 1975, she painted a complex figure on a lambskin parchment. In the background, a large, mysterious grey figure stands like a giant goddess. 2 small figures hold up 2 poles, supporting a banner that obscures this background form. On each of these poles are 5 labels. Some are in mirror writing. On the left pole, reading from the top, we have the She, the Tuatha Dé or fairy folk, the Banshee, a female spirit in Irish mythology, heralding death, the Magdan Muire, the Blessed Virgin, and the Firbolg, a mythological race that ruled Ireland before the coming of the Tuatha Dé Danann. On the right pole is the Tuatha Dé Danann, Samhain, Geola Cair, a figure associated with Finn MacCool, the mythical hunter-warrior of Irish mythology. Then Morrigan Mara, the great queen, goddess of war and fate. The lowest label is, however, not identifiable. The lower panel of the banner depicts a camel, above which is a label which could be read as Fergus MacRaoch, a character from the Ulster cycle of Irish mythology. In the circular blue space above is a hybrid of fish, deer, snake, and female human. In this painting, Carrington seems to be attempting a synthesis of elements of Celtic mythology. Molly Malone is a seemingly fictional character, a woman fishmonger who plied her trade on the streets of Dublin, who became conflated with the legend of 17th century hawker and part-time prostitute. There is, of course, a well-known Irish song about her. Carrington, in her Molly Malone's Chariot of 1975, appears to be trying to depict a ritual space in which the chariot is being drawn by 3 animals. This is set in a square space, at the corners of which are little animal figures, like the cardinal points of a magical circle. The upright posture of Molly Malone and the layout of the chariot could also be a reference to the chariot card in the tarot. The Red Horses of the She of 1996 is a relatively late work of Carrington. Here, a blue she spirit rides a red horse accompanied by 2 others through the waves. They are being attacked by an archer and his companions on the lower left, and also by a pair of large black birds, which almost seem to have fused into a single form. There is a well-known painting, The Riders of the She, of 1911, created by the Scottish symbolist painter John Duncan, who reworked Celtic myths and was a key figure in the Celtic revival movement in the early 20th century. And it may well be that Leonora knew this work. Through her paintings, it seems that Leonora Carrington was trying to promote interest in Celtic spiritual ideas, though in a non-didactic way, and through her use of enigmatic imagery. The next lesson in the series, number 4, is on Leonora Carrington's esoteric and magical paintings.